is the power of saints purely psychosomatic, or can saints work miraculous powers from beyond the grave?
I think you might say that God can in fact work a miracle because of the belief of people in a saint.
Yeah, I haven't had a personal experience that verifies that notion, but lots of other people claim to have, and I certainly would never rule out miracles.
Right. So in fact,
because God can break his habits.
Visit the body of who was the great saint who's encased in glass there in San Francisco.
Pio, Father Pio, is that it?
Well, no, this is the Russian.
Oh.
Are you referring to Seraphim Rose?
No, I'm talking about someone.
His master?
Before him, someone, they keep his body there in that cathedral, that Eastern Orthodox cathedral there in San Francisco. I went and visited it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of devout people that go there and worship. And of course, that's true of saints in Islamic tradition.
Exactly.
There are saints, yes, that people go and visit and say their prayers there. And I think that they feel, or that they have a visitation in their souls or in their hearts of something beyond this world. And so to ask whether that's the saint or God working through the remembrance of this saint and what this saint stood for or what he did, it's hard to make a distinction.
Right. And there's no point in it. It's these people go there with an intention, and they have an experience, and it hopefully benefits them. And that's all you need to know.
Well, my answer to the question would be both, in the sense that some of the greater mystics, Lawrence, they believe that essentially the saint's ability to break the barrier between realms is proportional to their holiness in this life. And so if a saint was particularly holy, who's to say that they can't occasionally, through the will of the divine, break that barrier in the form of a miracle? On the other hand, some of the more materialistic ways of viewing miracles, I think, are sort of silly. Like when they take a piece of cloth and touch it to the non-decomposed tongue of Saint Anthony and say this tiny piece of cloth that was part of a cloth that they touched to the non-decomposed tongue has the power to work miracles. Well, no, it doesn't. But maybe through your belief in that, you have there's some sort of psychosomatic event takes place that helps you. Great, no problem. It doesn't harm you. On the other hand, maybe simply through the power of your faith and belief, something happens from the other end, which is essentially a form of theurgy, because the ancients, believed that there was basically black magic and white magic. Black magic was trying to create some sort of supernatural event on your own. White magic or theurgy was simply using the power of prayer to allow the divine to work through you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the difference. There's just magic. You can use the term magic to talk about anything that we don't understand how it came about. But more specifically, it does have to do with manipulating forces and through means of symbols. And if the goal is material, then it's hard to see how the magic is very exalted.
Right. And the other thing is, I tend to think that miracles happen, but that they happen selectively and rarely and only, in certain cases. Like the true miracle is someone's eyes being opened to the reality of, a certain metaphysical truth. Some person catching the ball and winning the Super Bowl, that's not how God works.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, exactly. I think miracles are always some form of I once was blind, but now I see.
Right, right.
And it's not that you don't appreciate seeing a demonstration of great athletic skill.
Oh, no.
It's just that that is not a miracle.
That's athletic skill, is it?
Yeah, in itself, the fact that we are beings that can do that is a miracle, but not what we do.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind, I've read the books by Tony Hillerman, and I've now got some by his daughter, mystery stories, but they've taken place in the Navajo reservation, and about some Navajo police officers. But there was one, a Sergeant Chi, who got interested. I don't know, he was sort of partially westernized, and I think he went to Quantico and was trained as an FBI officer, and then at some point didn't follow through. But at any rate, he got a largely Western influenced education. But then when he went back into the Navajo reservation, he got very interested in an uncle who was a healer. I forgot exactly, faith healer, spiritual healer, and they decided to take lessons, and he started a course of, I guess, he was a student for several years, I think.
Yeah,
yeah. And then at some point there's a scene where his uncle is dying in a hospital in Albuquerque, and he goes to visit him, and he asks his uncle, he said, I'm so close to being, certified or initiated or whatever the term was to become a full-fledged healer. Who am I going, if you're not here, who should I look to? And Uncle says, you're never going to make it. You're never going to become a full faith, because in order to become an effective healer, it's not enough that your patients believe that what you're doing is effective. You have to believe it.
Yeah.
And you don't. So it's not going to work,
Well, he was living with this contradiction in his soul between being a policeman and being a healer. And the two attitudes were in conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting thing. If you're going to impart the healing, you maybe need to have unflinching faith that you can do it.
Because it's that your confidence and your belief is sort of transmitted.
Well, that's true too, yeah.
Conveyed, and that's part of the healing. I mean, that's part of the healing, is that if you believe it, the people that you're trying to heal can benefit from that and actually heal.
Yeah. Well, in a traditional society, I think most people that go to a traditional healer already believe that it can be done. But if you don't believe it, I get the point. It's like it takes faith on both ends.
Well, the actual healing has to come from, I guess, in the Indian parlance, the Great Spirit.
Yeah.
And it can't come through someone who doesn't believe in it.
You wouldn't think, although I have heard stories.
But it seems to me that part of initiation consists in being given the power and realizing that power.
It should.
Yes, you would think, but yes.
But, it's also true that, there is a psychophysical overlap, and if the patient is absolutely convinced, there may be healing available there regardless.
Yes.
What about the people that took themselves to what was it? Was it Bethesda, where the waters would get stirred?
You mean in the Holy Land, of the original Bethesda?
Yeah. And people would be healed, but some, not everybody was healed, but real healings apparently took place, and there wasn't, a person healer. So it kind of had to be the patient being open to the healing.
Yeah, or Lourdes is another, the one in France.
Yeah.
There was not someone there who served as a healer. It's just the people believed that miraculous healing could occur because of the, I don't know, I would say opening to the divine at that
Yes.
place.
Yes, exactly. So these are all mysteries, really, and I think anybody who rules them out is guilty of prematurely closing their accounts on reality.
All right.
Who
Next
said that? I didn't make that up. Somebody that is somewhat well known said that, but I don't know. Maybe it was, I don't know.
We'll attribute it to you.
By the way, I'm going to go to the second question, but it just occurred to me, Siddhi Dawood, I think you were probably referring to Saint John of Shanghai, the wonder worker.
Yes, it could have been.
All right.
Yes.
Question 2. We have talked a lot about direct paths, faster ways to God, etc., but is that a good thing? Does getting to God quickly and directly matter? And is the journey perhaps as important as the destination? Maybe taking the long and winding path to God can be just as efficacious. Thoughts?
Whatever works, whatever gets you there.
Well, yeah, one of the problems I see there at any rate is the tendency of people to assume that they have achieved something they haven't.
Sure. And a longer path may give you a lot more opportunity to realize that you have a tendency to delude yourself about your progress.
That's right.
I'm not saying that there aren't people that have had lightning flash enlightenment experiences. Of course there have.
Yeah.
Though I tend to believe that those are individuals that may, come into this life and, just to use a Buddhist expression, need to burn off some residual karma. But you definitely have to approach these situations with some level of doubt, because anytime someone comes to you and says, get rich quickly, or, become enlightened quickly, at the very least, you should take some time to examine those claims. Additionally,
something they can't guarantee.
Right. And additionally, the so-called gurus that tend to say that they're enlightened, you have to be doubtful of them as well, because the greatest of saints very rarely would call themselves saints, and most of the people going around saying how enlightened they are actually sexual predators.
Yeah, well, and look at all the saints that have referred to themselves the greatest of sinners and most miserable creatures, and
right.
I mean, that's a little excessive, and one finds it in Western Christianity. It's a little excessive, but there's a point. It's the truth to it.
What is the statement? I'm not sure that the numbers are correct, but that know 8 and only teach 7.
Say that again.
Know 8, but only teach 7.
Yeah,
in other words, don't surpass or go to the level of what you know in what you teach.
Well, it may be that you
have a possibility of misleading and not the consequences.
Yeah, when I think of that as, yes, there's a secret maybe not best conveyed, but also that it may be that the 8th thing is something that can only be done by the student who's received the previous 7.
Right.
There's the thing you can't do for someone else.
Yeah, I was thinking of Houston Smith wrote a book, and he had a chapter on psychedelics at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And he started off by saying, I think he quoted a Chinese saying, know 10 things, say 9.
Uh-huh.
So there's that last thing you shouldn't talk about. But then he proceeds to, he said, nevertheless, I'm going to talk about it a little.
Right. In spite of this.
Yeah, he couldn't resist. Speaking of that 10th thing, knowing he shouldn't. But.
There's this conflict right now in the modern world where you actually do have authentic teachers that might know 10 and want to only share 8 or 9, because that's the way it's always been done. But they also realized in the past, there were a multitude of other teachers out there. The tradition wasn't going to die. And today, if they don't share it, it might be lost.
Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah, I think I know made comments to that effect, that he was putting into books to be published for the general public things that traditionally would never be public, that would only be conveyed to a qualified disciple at the right moment. And but he said, given the tenor of the times that we live in, that just becomes necessary.
He did explain that in something of his that I read.
Yes, I read, he said that we had gone past the point where revealing those things would do any more damage
it makes sense.
than not delivering them.
Having them misunderstood is not the biggest danger. The biggest danger is having them lost.
Yes.
Well, and also in the past, sharing certain things could have been dangerous for the teacher, for sure. I mean, look to some of the examples there. But it also could have done serious harm to the seekers who just weren't ready to hear certain truths. But today, when basically anyone can go on the internet and find out anything, probably from some very shady sources, it's best to have those secrets opened up so that at least they're getting it from a more reputable source.
And you can understand in that process why it was a secret to start with.
Right.
And you'll have the respect for it. You should, I hope.
And that number 2 also says we have talked a lot about direct paths. And I don't think a path can be any more direct than, in fact, what you need in order to understand what is happening and what you're doing. In other words, you can't avoid. Sometimes a path is confused, and because it takes all of the different paragrations of it to in fact overcome the error that exists in the person.
Well, and there is no one path for everybody. The important thing is that the experiences of the path produce the necessary transformation.
And so you wouldn't want to skip something that you needed to go through in order to understand.
Right. In other words, a short path is not necessarily a shortcut. It just may be that in this particular person, it happens more quickly.
And there are more and less direct paths. Yeah. But, one of the errors I see today is people taking what historically have not been direct paths and just going to the very end of the teaching and saying, I'm going to practice this, and thinking that that's going to be helpful. And all it leads to is psychopathy and psychological delusions. And a perfect example of that is Kashmir Shaivism or Tibetan Tantrism. They say, I'm better than the monks that used to spend 30 years leading up to this. And I now have all these books. I can read about all these practices and go straight to the fun stuff. Well, it destroys them psychologically because they're not ready for it.
Right.
Well, and if they're greedy for the fun stuff, they're already shown themselves to be unqualified in a certain way.
Well, usually in many cases, they want to achieve these things so that they can show others their elevation. And that's very wrong.
Another thing is, I forget where it was. I think it was in the sermons of one of the Zen masters. And someone asked, what is the rationale for all of these years and years and years of practice someone has to go through? And the master said, I'll tell you a secret. None of it has any power in and of itself. It's all rather pointless. The entire point of all of it is simply to build up the two primary virtues of humility and patience. And that's the thing. Sometimes you think, oh, all of these prayers and all of these practices and everything have some value in and of themselves. No, that's not the point. The point is that we come into these things egoists, narcissists. We want to achieve something. We want to get to some sort of goal. And we think we're so amazing that we're better than others and we can approach things faster. And the entire point of basically making people slowly progress, and the master telling the student, oh, you're not good enough, you need to keep doing this mind-numbing thing more and more, is simply to cultivate humility.
Yes.
Well, that certainly has that power to do, create that humility.
What was that?
Really, it's an attitude that you have to realize rather than specific knowledge. And some people get that insight and they burst out laughing, and they, because all of a sudden everything, all that stuff seems silly.
As Miyagi would say, wax on, wax off.
Where does that come from? Wax on, wax off.
That movie, about the young boy who wanted to become a follower of this Korean person he met and learn the skills that he knew as far as the traditional way of life was concerned. And the person was Miyagi, was his name. And what he made the boy do was go and sand his fence for day after day after day, sand on, sand off.
Oh, yeah.
So he was teaching him humility.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the things practiced in monastic orders, in addition to perhaps being practical, were really just to, tame the unruly soul.
Yes.
I think that each person there's a certain unique quality to each person's spiritual path, and I think I started attending a Southern Baptist church at age 4, and then eventually became a Presbyterian when I got married, and I did, so this is like 40 some odd years, and then eventually found our Tarika. But I don't look back on those earlier experiences and think those were a waste of time. I mean,
No.
It was just part of I don't see any way to discredit it or think poorly of it. It was just until I was ready. That was my path. That was just
That's part of what got you to where you are now. If you're grateful for where you are now, then
and that's where
don't disparage what got you there.
Yeah, that's how that was just the path I took. Anyway, whether it's short or long, I guess to say that a path is short, you first have to conclude that you've reached the end of it, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I mean, I've reached the end, and so it wasn't so long.
It took 60 years, but it was pretty short.
Feels short now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, question 3. As one gets older and advances on the spiritual path, all the old attachments generally start falling away. Are there any things you are still attached to, and why?
I'm still attached to comfort, for sure.
That's a good point. Lack of pain.
Yeah.
I don't know about attached. I'm very grateful for it. Of course, there's an attachment there. I don't welcome any recurrence of pain, but I'm very grateful when I don't have pain.
Oh, well, sure. And it's nice if you don't have anything pressing to do at the moment, but I'm attached to not doing things a little bit too much. I mean, if I really weren't attached, then it would be all the same to me, whether I was working hard or resting, and it's not.
Well, the first of the year, I made a resolution to lose weight, and the first 2 months I lost 10 or 11 pounds, but then I started gaining it back, and I'm down about 8 pounds or 7 pounds. But I'm not giving up. I mean, I've had in my mind, well, I'll do it this year. I'll give myself a whole year. But I mean, I am attached to eating.
Not unusual. It's hard to be not somehow attached to things necessary for life.
Well, but I'm attached to eating to the point where I eat more than I
Sure.
It's
should.
repeating the pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He who knows that enough is enough will always have enough, which is one way of loose translation of the Tao, I think. But I think the original is just a little bit closer to saying, he who knows what enough is will have enough. But we're all addicted to more in some sense. I remember in Jethro Tull's Passion Play.
Yes.
There's a line where he says, "The last hymn is sung and the devil cries more."
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Huh. I didn't know that. I guess I never paid enough attention.
Well, I've listened to it many times. It's a masterpiece of rock music.
Yeah.
And it contains there's a lot of material in there.
Right.
I mean, it is supposed to portray the journey of is it Ronnie Pilgrim? Anyway, it's a soul's journey from death to rebirth. And there are all these. It's an amazing work of art.
Yeah.
Now, which is it?
It's the album that Jethro Tull did called A Passion Play.
And he's a rock and roll.
Oh yeah, big time.
They're having a 50th anniversary tour this year.
Oh really?
Uh-huh.
But is Ian Anderson still alive?
I have no idea, but they're having a 50th anniversary tour.
Well, good for them. They're having their rebirth.
Right.
Yeah, it is a stunning, absolutely stunning work. I came across it not having any idea where it was, and it just took me on a journey that I have, never forgotten. It's really yummy. And it's
your dear friend feels exactly the same way.
Yeah. And it is incredible work of art. It isn't just clever. It isn't just saying the right things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an amazing musical creation.
So
I recommend it. I'm sitting around wondering what to do for the duration of an LP or a CD, because I think it all fits. Yeah, it all fits on one CD. Stick it in and listen to it, and you'll find that you have to listen to it more than once to make sure you really got all the words, because you don't want to miss any.
It reminds me of something I heard years ago by a group called The Who.
Yeah.
About the deaf, dumb, and blind boy. And
oh yeah, Tommy. Yeah.
Tommy, is it a similar genre what you're talking about?
No, it stands on its own. I mean, each one, I suppose, is presented as a rock opera of sorts.
Rock opera, yeah.
I believe Tommy was called that.
The term, yeah. Jesus Christ Superstar was also
yeah.
Rock opera sort of thing.
Sort of. I mean, whatever that means. It's not a meaningless description. Anyway, yeah. That was quite
something. And the name of the album is what?
Oh, A Passion Play.
A Passion Play.
Uh-huh. And it sings about the man of passion in there also, which is kind of neat.
Being detached. Going back to the subject of detachment, there was an article I read, and I think I've shared it with some of you by Lord North on aging, and he talks about the fact that a very normal event that happens in the aging, the latter stages or phases, is it's a process of withdrawal, and you do drop. There may be lots of friends and relatives that you make with a lot of time and effort you could keep up with, but you have a tendency you don't have that much time and effort despair.
When your priorities change.
Yeah, and yes, I mean, I did go through a phase, fortunately, after I left the government, of getting to travel quite a bit. But at this point, I have no, particular interest in seeing the world. I think I've seen enough of it for me.
Right.
But
right.
So withdrawal is a form, I guess, of detachment.
Yeah, it's a letting go. It's
disengagement, sort of.
It's a disengagement because you no longer need it as part of your identity. In my case, I built a chem lab for myself in the basement, and I had ham radio equipment and all kinds of stuff that I really enjoyed, along with playing an electronic keyboard or a piano. And I spent lots of time enjoying. And, at a certain point, I just boxed up my radio equipment, said, I don't need to do this anymore.
You've been there, done that.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's like when I think back about it, all my memories are pleasant. And if I were to get the stuff out of the box and get it all set up again, I would probably enjoy some of it, but not enough to have it all set up. And, it served a purpose in my life. It was, but I don't need it anymore.
What is the name for the Hindu person after a certain age? One into the wilderness and more or less gives up all of the things that he had in his life.
It's the sannyasin, isn't it?
Sannyasin,
yes.
Yes, they withdraw from society and family and
right. And so I think that's probably what you're speaking of in the ultimate sense. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you let go of everything. There's it's not like a deliberate ascesis or anything. It's just there's something the present moment is good enough.
Yeah, the time comes, and that seems to be
right.
Appropriate to put away childish things or even adultish things.
Yeah, and we should be constantly outgrowing things, not recklessly throwing things away, but when I was a child, I spake of like a child, et cetera, and that continues throughout your life if you're lucky.
Well, we may be near the end of the session.
Well, we ought to be, given the time.
I did want to share one sort of inspiration that you may want to talk about it sometime, but I was thinking of the Muslim notion of being a Khalifa, not in the formal title, but just being someone who is a representative of Allah in this world, and that I think is something that one can attain to at some point on the path. And I think all five of us and others who are Khalifas in one sense or another. So even though we often talk about terrible things we can see in the future, possibilities, as well as the present, I think as long as we're here, we have the capacity to counteract those things in some way.
But happiness only occurs in the present moment. So why not now?
There was one thing I wanted to say. I forget which one of the questions we were discussing that occurred to me, and I never did say it or never did say anything. But I think there's a misunderstanding of beyond being as being an ascent towards unity. Well, in fact, beyond being is not beyond. It's not beyond possibilities. Those possibilities simply are beyond being manifested.
Yeah.
So so you might say it is a wondrous place.
Yeah. Well, so possibilities. In fact,
you're saying when we all die and go to heaven, we won't just be reabsorbed into the infinite one.
No, you will be reabsorbed in a way that you are appreciating the possibilities that are unmanifestable or are not there beyond manifestation.
So we won't be. So you're saying that beyond being will still be, will be being beyond being?
No, I'm saying that those possibilities cannot, in the sense that of being manifested. But that doesn't mean that they can't be, you might say, seen in some respect. In other words, experienced.
I think one thing I would say is that there's certainly entity, or for lack of a better term, a substance, whatever. Any word I use is going to be wrong. Beyond being, to use Eckhart's term, ground. That's as good as anything, and that's that from which the divine came from, and then from the divine came everything else. But I think one of my major differences with some mystics, though not others, is that there's no reintegration fully into the ground. At most, it would be a conjectural or partial reintegration, because ultimately the divine doesn't do things for no reason. It doesn't just on a whim say, I'm creating manifestation and then I'm going to absorb it all and wipe the slate clean, and then I'm going to keep doing this. That's actually very depressing and I believe wrong. I don't believe that a divine entity would just do things for no reason. I believe that there's a superabundance of love that causes creation, and that whatever form creation takes afterwards, that something remains.
Well, that's the whole, beyond being is the place from which God said, be.
That's right. But there are possibilities, and who knows, they may be so numerous, or you can't. That's really kind of a contradiction in a way. But there may be these possibilities are not manifestable.
At least not in our experience.
Right. So God can't say, I'm going to be evil.
Well, no.
But the tendency of it, in some respects, is a direction that is possible. But its realization is impossible.
Yes, exactly. The outer limits, where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. The limit of manifestation is really an idea of nothingness, but it's also farthest removed from the creation, and so it has a function as darkness and evil, depending on how you need to use it.
So I guess what I'm saying is there is a level of realization which is not a disappearance into just some oneness.
I don't think there's a disappearance.
Well, it's kind of,
it's an experience of the oneness, and a lot of the frills and things that went along with what you were doing before may not be there.
Well, and that's the thing. It's different. It's new. Even Eckhart, who is rather radical on this, maybe even too radical for my taste. Even Eckhart, when he talks about, let's say, St. John's or St. Paul's, one of them, their temporary ascension to the divine realm, they realized everything they loved back on earth wasn't there, but it didn't matter because there were things far greater.
That's right. That's exactly, yes, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. And of course, in Islam, the things we find in the next life or in the beyond, we say, oh, this is what I experienced before.
In a different form. So
exactly.
We withdraw.
Saying, oh, this is it's like, oh, this is the reality of that which I was experiencing.
And it's too big and too real to in fact be manifested.
Well, it's hard to separate manifestation from time, and manifestation What time? I don't know who said that. Time is what God uses to make sure everything doesn't happen at once.
That's a good
But
way.
it is, yeah, it is. But it's also true. There are things that cannot exist simultaneously in space and time, but that doesn't mean they can't exist. They remain possibilities.
I mean, so you would know there is a knowing that is beyond the discreteness of being.
Well, going back to the statement I said about withdrawing or detaching,
Yeah.
we withdraw from things in this world, not for the purpose of simply ceasing to be, but in preparation for participation in something else, like hopefully something better.
Well, and the notion is that you can't take it with you. So when you realize you're going to leave, you can start realizing what you can't take with you.
Yeah.
And another thing, the reason nothing is said about what its nature is because it's inexpressible.
Of course.
All right, until Thursday.
Until Thursday, but I'll just end by saying recently I read Herman Melville's Clarel, the longest poem ever written by an American, 18,000 lines. And it's remarkably lucid, enlightened, and it's 600 pages of metaphysical speculation and whatnot that integrates in an almost perennialist way Islam, Hinduism, Christian mysticism, and even modern philosophy. And I just thought after reading this, what the hell happened to this country that we had people like Melville, Emerson, and Thoreau 140 years ago, and today we're in an intellectual swamp.
Cesspool.
Cesspool. I should not have used the word swamp because that's politically loaded now, but you know what I was getting at.
Well, I wasn't trying to avoid the word. I just wanted to sort of make it a little more negative.
Right.
And the poem is called Clarel, Clarelle.
No, Clarel.
I have never heard of that in my entire life.
It's fantastic, and it's I mean all of Melville from Moby Dick onwards is worth reading. His early stuff not as much, but Clarel particularly. It's basically, the subtitle is A Pilgrimage in the Holy Land, and cool. Large parts of it are dialogues between Christian mystics, Sufis, and someone who is an agnostic and another person who is essentially representing something like a hybrid of Zoroastrianism and Vedanta. It's good stuff if you like long, well-written epic poetry, but why it's not well known, probably because no one reads poetry anymore, and even in his day, at least in America, I mean, Americans have never been one for long poetry. Americans tend to go to the short verses of Emily Dickinson or whatnot. I can think of two really great long American poems, Clarel and then Pound's Cantos, which, if you try to read it individually as separate poems, it doesn't make sense. But if you read the entire thing together as Pound's updated version of the Divine Comedy, then it makes
Ezra Pound.
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And Pound, also was deeply flawed, deeply spiritual. And Melville, in Moby Dick, I honestly think, as we were talking about spiritual masters and stuff, I think Ahab is the perfect example of what a lot of gurus are today. They so tirelessly pursue the absolute that they end up destroying themselves in the pursuit to the absolute and destroy everyone on their, proverbial ship. And we've certainly witnessed that phenomenon in the Tariqa.
The refiner's fire is not the only spiritual exercise.
Yes.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel.